smart, but I'm stupid. I'm gay, but I'm straight. I crop dust in Whole Foods, baby. What it all comes down to.
Yes. Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sprints and Shop Talk. This is the version of the Troublemaker stream in which I ask people questions aligned to a specific theme and get endlessly behind on the chat, but it's okay. And for those of you who DM'd me last night in surprise, yes, this is a Sprints and Shop Talk 3 weeks after the last Sprints and Shop Talk. You can blame the 3 people here for that.
You're welcome.
But it also means that you are free from accountability this week, as it always is with Sprints and Shop
Who is
Talk.
keeping tabs on how many weeks has gone since the last sprint?
Really yeah, who's doing that?
Is this you, Wallace?
Miranda. Is it Miranda?
There were messages.
Did you text yourself?
No, there were messages. But yes, there is no accountability this week, so everybody can breathe a sigh of relief. There will be no shames today. Also, except for the fact that I'm shaming Devesha because everybody was dancing backstage except for you. You were just staring.
Oh, I was texting.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. How are you 3 today? I'm loving this symmetry. I wish I had a gray background. Katie and I could be one part of the checkerboard and you guys could be the more like nature part of the checkerboard. It's good.
I could go sit over by the fireplace, which is a little bit, it's like brown, but like
to give wood. Yeah.
Well, yeah. To give like a similar vibes.
Do it for the aesthetic. Also, I'm going to say right off the start, I am in the backwoods of the middle of nowhere. And so it's very likely that I'll pop out. So I'm thriving on the string of a hotspot that is really managing to hold itself together. So anyway, Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm thriving. I was out doing my hot boy stomp this morning. Saw deers, saw squirrels, saw birds, saw bees. It's a good time. I've been doing great during camp. It's just stars are aligning for me, and I'm here for it.
I love that. That's awesome. What's been your favorite part about being in the United States? For those of you who don't know, Steve, Katie, and Devesha are all on a writing retreat together. They are, in fact, all in the same location. I was not invited, but that's okay. I won't take it personally.
Shut up, Wallace.
There were only 3 beds. I'm sorry.
There are 4, but
yeah,
there's 6 sleeping spaces here or something.
That's okay. They invited Jod instead, and I understand because she is superior. Steve, what's been your favorite part about being in the United States so far?
I mean, obviously, getting to hang, with 2 of the coolest people I know, which is Devesha and Katie, and honestly, just being able to being on a writing retreat and focus on writing without having to like deal with everyday bullshit. I just going on silly little Starbucks runs, stuff like that.
A really crap Dunkin'.
Yeah, it's been it's better than no Dunkin', I think? ?
Yeah, that's true.
No.
But yeah, that's been good. Just being able to be on a retreat, focusing on writing and being around creative forces like Katie and Devesha.
It sounds like it's been very beneficial, which is awesome. How far ahead of you are of your? Whoa, that English was travesty. How far ahead of your camp goal are you?
That is a very good question. Let me just check out my stats while we listen to this bird singing in the background.
While you do that,
aesthetically pleasing.
Katie, how are you doing on this writing retreat and on this fine morning?
I'm doing good. Woke up feeling refreshed today. I'm making coffee, so I'm a little bit tired until I get that. But yeah, writing's been going okay. It went better yesterday than the previous 2 days.
Okay.
But I've gotten to a section where I can kind of copy paste, retype what I already have, so I don't have to write anything from scratch. So that's great. Thank God.
That's awesome.
And I made it to the midpoint. Whoa, we made it.
The curse is broken, and that's actually huge because you've been just before the midpoint for over a month, so that's a big deal.
I have not been able to get through a single midpoint on any book that I've written since probably The Wrath King last year.
Oh yeah, because the witch book was a problem too. That's interesting.
She
No,
was
that's not
annoyed.
true because you wrote Cruel Summer. So you got
Oh, that's true. I forgot I'd already.
Yeah.
Summer.
You forgot that you'd already written an entire book earlier this year and are now rewriting it. So I love that.
Is
for
it a
you.
book or is it just?
She's struggling
Yeah,
with midpoint plot, not midpoint
Mhm.
vibes.
yeah. The
Steve,
midpoint
did you-
vibes are there.
Steve, did you figure out your excess?
Yes, I'm 2,000 words ahead, which isn't a lot, but for me,
No,
whew.
that's amazing.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. That's such great breathing room. Keep it up. You're doing great. Devesha, darling, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. I woke up feeling a touch under the weather, but it could just be the lady times,
Oh, those are some times, aren't they?
Your creative flow.
Your creative flow. Exactly. Your Virgin River. Your
Oh God.
sorry. That was sorry.
You have to explain that.
You have to explain that. I'm so
You have to
sorry.
explain
Well, no, this is like so gross. So trigger warning, I guess, to anybody who doesn't want to hear about menses. But my sister and I were
It's a natural part of the body. It's not gross at all.
Well, okay. Anyway, my sister and I were hanging out once and we were watching Netflix, and this was a long time ago, and the ad for this TV show called Virgin River came up, and just as I'm so sorry, this is so inappropriate.
But people need to know you said it. You brought it up. You have to give context.
Just as a joke, I said that's what I call my period, and she almost died. She was drinking water at the time, and she started choking, and like she literally turned purple, and she was laughing and dying at the same time, and it was actually really scary. I wrote it down in my diary, like on this day I almost killed my sister. Anyway, I so apologize for that. I'm mortified that that's how we started the stream, but anyway,
Actually, we started with lies and slander. So
well, anyway, it's not a trouble stream unless there is
License slander.
I don't know. Oh man, okay, but I'm sorry you're not feeling well, Devesha. How's the writing aspect of the writing retreat going, though? Are you getting some progress? I know there's been a lot of brainstorming.
It's been a lot of retreating.
And for those who don't know, brainstorming is code for nap time in the hammock.
Listen, okay, that happened twice.
In 3 days that you've been in here so far. So
And one of them was a 5-hour nap, so
That's true.
Oh,
the
dang.
writing hasn't
That's
been
amazing.
going extraordinarily well, but the outlining has been going well.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Every time I start to write, I'm like, okay, this is something I need to think about, plot out, and outline a little bit more. But I did start rewriting the first chapter, like just transferring it over into my Scrivener, and I was able to add like a couple hundred words to what I already had. But soon, very soon, I'm going to be into some new content, a new scene.
What part of the story?
The beginning. It's the everyday life of the main character a bit.
Stop. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I was trying to get timer set up. Everyday life of the main character. Got it. All right. 9 minutes into it, let's say hello to everybody who's here. Danny arrived early. Hope we didn't jump scare you. Hi, Crystal. Hi, Jess. Hi, Becca. RK Stumbling Bear says, good morning. I'm going to listen to this while I drive. I am so sorry about that period joke I made. Anna is here. Hello. Jessica says, I am almost alive and ready. Nikki, hi. Hi, Marta. Hi, Caitlin. Yes, you got to see the intro. The fabulous intro that Catherine made. All of our little doodads are from the brain of Catherine. It's always amazing. Goop Time Zone. This I also really like this intro, except there's one, and maybe it's just it's the outro, the Go Piss Girl outro is like so calming. I love that one.
with the Crop Dust and Whole Foods intro, I'm not sure if the beginning 4 seconds is like sped up a little bit because it just feels like it's slowing down like at a sudden point. Like, oh, okay.
It is. And I don't know why, because I guess it just must be the YouTube video that I found the original intro to the song for, because obviously that part of the song, the lyrics, are not the actual lyrics to that Alanis Morissette song. So I had to find the actual Alanis Morissette song and then like
Yeah.
line them up so it actually
Yeah.
would get to where you could hear the lyrics.
It
So
was a lot of work, and you did a really great job.
thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's my favorite thing.
Danny
you.
thinks about it every time she goes grocery shopping because
I'm so
she likes to fart in her health food store, so it's great. Marta is appreciating everybody's backgrounds. Anna is saying, has there ever been this much sunlight in a trouble stream? I'm living for it. I'm going to try and read everything out loud for the person who's driving. Stumbling Bear, I hope you're still here because I'm doing this all for you.
So for you, Damien.
It's all for you. Danny says, why is it that the only weeks I can show up are the weeks that we don't check accountability? Like, WTF, hold me accountable. Look, it's their fault we're doing Sprints and Shop Talk. I didn't want to do Sprints and Shop Talk. I said Sprints and Shop Talk is a once every 4 weeks thing. And they were like, nope, the rotation. It's up you
No,
next.
what Wallace said was it's a once a month thing. And we said, bitch, it's a new month.
Well, but I was using month in terms of week count, not like
Okay, well,
calendar
that's not
month.
what I said.
And
I was
also,
saying-
having no accountability during Sprints and Shop Talk was your idea. So if we had accountability during Sprints and Shop Talk, this wouldn't even be a discussion.
I refuse to have this be made my fault. All right. Devacia's just like, I'm not going to say anything.
I was going to call you out a little bit more, but I was like, I'm going to let her have it.
Oh, man.
Why beat the dead horse?
Because that's literally our bit.
That's true. You got to
The bread and
escalate.
butter.
Marta says, well, that's good because this is literally my worst accountability week since we started doing it. See, there you go. For you, Marta.
Next week.
I'm here for you, Marta. Oh, great. Be weary. Don't want to show the license plate of the car behind you.
I know. I was like, oh, let's not dox Katie. That's why I've been kind of sitting still. But as soon as we get into a sprint, I'm going to switch to the other side.
You can do that now if you want.
Docs Katie.
Whatever. Michael's here. Katie's giving wood.
It's the Sagittarius.
Oh man. Miranda was
wood.
also laughing with
Sorry,
you, Daisha. Kelly is here. Laura is here. Violet is here. There was a deer. Apparently, people saw a deer. I was not invited, Jess. They actually specifically said, look, the three of us need to have time where we actually get to talk. And you just would suck it all up like a vacuum. So
Once
That's not
again, with the
true.
lies and slander.
Lies and slander.
You and Kate are equals in the talking department. It's fine.
Danny says, yeah, y'all are less than 2 hours for me and no one's wanted to stop by and say hi.
You didn't want to come over and say hi.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Come on over, Danny.
But this is the actual truth. I am in my own cabin with family who I only get to see during a very specific time of year. And so I couldn't, even though I love the troublemakers, I love my family more. I'm sorry. I can't help it. It's like genetic. Oh, this is not a bad strategy, Jess, to want to get on my good side. Cool Gamer is here. Hi. Grape and Steeg, Miranda says, are giving folklore. And that is very true. Marta says, looks like all the hammock brainstorming is finally paying off. Lexi is here. Hi, Lexi. Oh, sorry.
Hey, Lexi.
Bestie.
Yep. Miranda was going to remind you about writing Cruel Summer. Is the new Cruel Summer midpoint turn also a roundabout you can't exit, or is it a protected left-hand turn? All these driving metaphors are confusing me.
It's a protected left-hand turn. No, it's like it's a left-hand turn, but I'm also crossing over a divided highway.
It's an illegal highway U-turn.
I know, Anna. I hope this. I'm assuming this is in reference to the Virgin River comment. I apologize.
Indeed.
This is a good point, Caitlin. I support it being normalized, but I can't help the blush that crosses my face whenever we do have to talk about it. Almost killed my sister with my, oh my gosh, yeah. That's literally what I wrote. I almost killed her because I was so funny. I was so funny.
I like how you said you were going to try to read out the comments for
I
RK
know,
and then kind of just swoop.
I'm so sorry. But yes, I love it when I almost murder people. Anyway. Hi, Michael. Everybody's saying hi to everybody. Nikki says that hammock looks like a great place for brainstorming or taking
It really
naps.
is.
Laura is setting up her bullet journal for the writing conference. Crystal
Also,
said,
congratulations on selling your short, Laura. That's
yes,
amazing.
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, congratulations.
Hell yeah. I don't have the hell yeah capabilities, but just know that I was thinking about it.
It's not gonna do it. But...
Well, I can't. I don't have access. Because
Um,
someone doesn't use the troublemaker.
It's because we have StreamYard Pro when it's on my
Who is
account.
we?
It's you.
Who's this royal we?
Fine. I'll start signing into the Trouble.
And also,
account.
what benefits are StreamYard Pro giving you that you're not getting from the Trouble channels?
I just got an announcement that I can alert or upload my own background music. So we could
Oh,
choose a song. We could choose a theme song. So I feel like that's
Ooh.
pretty
I'm
cool.
smart, but I'm stupid. Just have that in a loop in the background.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Let's see. What is everybody? Oh, hello, guys. Everybody is here. Got some good kebab and at your laptop, ready to write.
I
Do
love
you like how Alice laughed at me saying Katie is giving wood when I was just repeating what she said? Wait, what? I don't remember half the things I say. So, jokes on you. I didn't even need to be there and still dominated a few conversations. Danny's the kind of gay who can't drive.
So is
That's so
Katie.
interesting. I also don't drive, so that's weird. Yeah. Oh my gosh, have I gotten up with the comments?
Wild.
Good morning, Other Wallace. Hope you're doing well.
And Nemesis.
My nemesis, you're on my list. Anna says the theme song is I Knew Your Trouble, Goat Scream, Taylor's version, but also, Taylor's version, ethical version, exactly.
Yes.
All right.
I love that that's like your most viewed video on your channel.
Oh, by far. And I knew it would be too.
Iconic.
I'm pretty sure if you go up and you look up if you go into YouTube and search for that video, and a lot of people had the same idea as I did, but I'm pretty sure I'm the first person who did it because I had the idea 6 hours earlier and I had everything geared up to go. I had everything in Final Cut Pro ready to get cut. And yeah, I think I had it up 12 minutes after the song released. So I'm very proud of that video in terms of being first.
Yeah.
But definitely not most viewed. Anyway, yeah. Are people ready to sprint?
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Katie, Lexi
I'm
says
ready
Catherine,
for
your hair looks
breakfast.
gorgeous today. You're ready for breakfast? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do we want to start with a little sample sprint or like a real sprint?
Real sprint.
A
A real sprint.
Okay.
Okay.
No
I'm just
free
going to
sample.
randomize it. I'm going to start a playlist and hope it's a 25-minute sprint. Here we go. What is it? It's a 20-minute ocean sunset timer.
Ooh, is it from Laura?
It is from Laura. Why does it have 0 likes? I'm liking this. Okay, and then I have to actually share my screen. We love being a prepared lady. Share and theater mode. Oh no, wait, we want full screen actually. All right, and then as people are sprinting, I'm going to put up the first question because this is how we do sprints in Shoptalk. I put up my first question. People can answer during the sprint, and then I will return and we can ask our co-hosts about it after the sprint is over. Oh, but really quickly, Stieg, are you just going to continue working on what you've been working on this whole time?
Yes, I'll be drafting my little projects on Flower.
Nice. Katie, you're going to be working on Cruel Summer edits.
I am indeed.
And Devesha.
Beginning
I'm gonna
breakfast.
Yep. Thank you, Stieg.
All righty. This is the first question. Which genre, contemporary or fantasy, do you have more of an affinity for? Why? Very basic. Here we go. Happy sprinting, friends. never fails to get me. All right, welcome back. I hope that sprint was productive, and you're welcome to say how you did, Steve.
I got 67 words, which isn't great, but I had to kind of just redefine some things.
Yeah, you're settling in for the day.
Just move some things.
Yeah, well. Katie, how did you do?
I got some coffee, of course. I brought Tom Tom with me.
Nice. Wow.
To
Place of
retrieve.
honor.
She really is. And then I responded to the 6,000 texts that my mother sent me because since I am not at home with her, she has to send me every detail of her day via text. So I had to respond to that for 20 minutes. Otherwise, she would start calling and being like, "Are you dead?
Yeah.
Are you dead?"
I will
And we
have
know that
everyone know.
keeping up with Mama Eyeballs is a full-time job.
It is a full-time job.
I will have.
I love her,
everyone
but
know.
she's crazy.
I'm sure I've said this before. I'm positive I've said this before because I found it so hilarious. But I would just like everyone to know that when I had Katie over at my cabin, before she was allowed to go, her mother did a full background check on me. So, and I was a little alarmed by how much information she was able to figure out. Yeah. Anyway,
To be fair, my mother did have your actual full name,
that's true.
which people on the internet do not have. So my mother was working on an advantage.
That is true, but still, my name's not exactly a common one. So I was like, man, I really need to scrub my presence from the internet, don't I? Devisha, how did you do? Made your breakfast success?
Yeah, strawberries and a coffee.
That sounds really good. All right. We're going to jump right into the first question. As we always do, I'll be asking one of my co-hosts the question and then doing a couple of comments and then back and forth, etc. Stieg. Oh, and I would just like everybody to know the reason I chose this specific topic was because, as it so happens, all four of us write in both genres. And I thought that how interesting that is a thing. And especially recently, some of us have really taken a nosedive from one genre to the other. So I thought it would be a great time to, really explore what's going on between these two genres, contemporary and fantasy, and why they have such interesting pulls on us. So, Stieg, my darling, which genre, contemporary or fantasy, do you have more of an affinity for and why?
I'm going to be a contrarian.
Go for it. As the first person, I think you're setting the standard. You're not being contrarian.
Okay, well, I'm going to set the standard then and say that I have an affinity for both, but for different reasons, really.
Sure.
Reading wise, fantasy definitely is like what I read the most because of escapism and all that jazz, and just being like a product of a fantastical upbringing. Not that I'm like Frodo or anything, but I read a lot as a child, and it was just purely fantasy. So I definitely read more fantasy than contemporary, but the shows I consume are more contemporary than fantasy. Especially, I think this might be a question later. I have forgotten, but like I love romance, contemporary romance, but it's not for like escapism reasons. It's just kind of I watch a lot of teen shows, and it's kind of just mourning a youth that I never had. So that's why I think I like to consume that as like a visual media. So yeah, reading, I definitely consume more fantasy or have an affinity for more fantasy because of escapism, and consuming wise, I think I watch more contemporary romance shows.
And then I'm so sorry, I'm going to turn my computer on focus mode. I keep getting a million texts. In terms of you as a writer, if you look at your body of work and try to sort each of your pieces into one of these two genres, do you think one genre is one you historically have fallen more towards?
Definitely fantasy, but that's because contemporary romance is more like not a renaissance. What's like, because the renaissance is something coming back, but what's like something just happening.
Like for
A
you.
revelation.
Yeah, for me.
It's a new turn. So do you want to?
Yeah.
It's your year of realizing.
Yeah.
It's my year of realizing that I enjoy contemporary romance.
Yeah, writing contemporary romance.
Yeah, writing contemporary romance. But like if you look at my very extremely limited body of written work, it is 95% fantasy and then just one contemporary romance project. That's a new thing. It's a new era. It's my reputation era.
And what do you think?
I think it's
Or
your
my
lover
lover
era.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense. What do you think kind of sparked this switch for you from your so solidly, consistently fantasy and now suddenly having a brain rot project of contemporary romance?
I think it's twofold. Not the fold. Let's go back. I think it's two-part. One is that it's just more queer romance available these days because the world is moving a bit. Well, it's kind of two steps forward and one step back at times, but there's just more queer media available, and that's kind of what sparked my interest. Like, as I said, the kind of mourning a youth I never had.
And do you think that also, consuming that media has like inspired you to also produce it?
Yes, it has inspired me to produce it, but it also has sent me into depressive spirals. So it's twofold. No, it's two-part.
Enough with the folds.
Yeah, enough with the folds.
Do you think,
but also, I think in terms of just being the age I am and being at a point in my life where I kind of reflect on, a childhood and a youth, that's kind of also like something that I've been like exploring or like reflecting on rather. So,
and is that something you're gonna explore within your contemporary romance? Is it a young adult contemporary romance, or is it a?
No, it is an adult, but like the backdrop for the romance is like a youth, like what could have been moment.
Okay. And have you? I mean, like, how far into it are you? Are you finding it a cathartic experience, or is it furthering your depressive spirals? Because then that deserves some analysis, maybe.
I mean, just to be clear, I'm out of my depressive spiral. I'm in my I'm in my lover era, but I think that I'm just at the ID stage right now, so I'm still just it's still track one. So let's see what the rest of the album is like.
I love that. That's so brilliant. All right. So Miranda says, I wonder how I'm going to answer this question. You mean you don't have a million fantasy stories you haven't told us about? Nikki says, simply, fantasy, because it can be anything. That's very true. Caitlin says, fantasy, no question. But I do enjoy reading some contemporary. Writing, though, always fantasy. Laura says, fantasy for sure. Need that escape. Don't want to read or write about the real world as it actually is. Want a twist in the fabric of reality. I love that. Gay says, I have more of an affinity for fantasy. This is an amazing trend we're discovering right now, you guys. Miranda, we need you to come in hot with your contemporary take. Gay says, I have more of an affinity to fantasy, if only because I love imagining worlds and building up histories. I have always had an overactive imagination, so maybe there's also that. I think contemporary is a great genre, just not something I'd really write unless a good idea strikes me. Kudos to those who can write it, though. You know what this comment section is telling me, guys, is that fantasy is oversaturated. And that the money is in contemporary because it's a desperate audience. No, I don't know at all. That's probably completely not true.
That sounds kind of accurate, though.
Does it? I have no idea.
Well, it seems like everyone wants to read contemporary. No one wants to write it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Lexi says, that's a difficult question. I'm pretty neutral about both these days. Oh, neutral. That's an interesting word that you're using, Lexi. As in, like, I want to know, does she mean neutral as in equates the two, or neutral as in she's cooled off in her interest in both? Anyway, I used to think I was a fantasy gal all the way, but then I started noticing how a lot of fantasy tropes majorly irk me.
All the way.
I'm trying to give voice.
I know, and you're giving. I love it.
You're giving.
You're serving, and I'm here.
Wood.
You're giving wood. Oh man. M, I'm assuming, says fantasy across the board, but do enjoy reading or watching contemporary things as well. Lexi says, adds on to her previous comment. Plus, like magical realism in a contemporary setting and genre fiction, like a thriller in a contemporary setting, there's a lot of possibilities for contemporary. I know, but we're doing the umbrella terms. And that is interesting. Magical realism in a contemporary setting. I think I would still define as fantasy, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, what's magical realism like compared to fantasy?
Yeah, because
That-
when I
Magical
said,
The corporate wants to define the difference between these two pictures.
well, when I was saying fantasy versus contemporary, I wasn't saying like high fantasy. I just mean, is it our world or isn't it, basically, and to make it as simplified as possible. But I know that there's nuance. I'm recognizing that there's nuance, but that's not what. Again, I was saying to right before the stream when I was coming up with the questions. One of the questions suggested was like basically, what are the elements of fantasy and stuff. I said I'm not really interested in having a conversation today about like the definitions of the genres. I really just want to explore everybody's process and relationship with those genres. So, like I said, you are welcome to discuss the nuance, but it's not something that I'm particularly interested in focusing on at the moment. Wallace James says, fantasy. I don't find solely contemporary media all that interesting. I love the setting detail and history that goes into a lot of fantasy. Give me magic, not real life problems. Fair. I have more fun writing fantasy. It's the escapism for me, babe. But funnily enough, I think on a line level, I write better when it's contemporary. World building is hard. That's fair. Danny says, well, I wrote one sentence and then the fire alarm went off in my building, so we'll see if I get back inside before the sprint is over. Probably not. Sorry. And also, we all know I'm a fantasy bitch. All right. Good luck with that, Danny. Crystal says, I've always leaned more toward fantasy. Damn, we have not had a single... Oh, here we go. Jessica underneath this, but hold on. Crystal says, I've always leaned more toward fantasy. Even the contemporary I'm working on leans more toward fantasy in a modern adjacent setting, so I don't think I could write without a fantasy element. That's fair. Jessica says, I rebel. I am a contemporary fantasy queen, which just means fantasy, babe. I want magic and witches and spooky things set in the modern world. Actually, no, I think that's a fair distinction. But I think that's similar to Crystal's, right? In terms of you're writing in our world, but with a twist, as Laura said all the way up. Twist in the fabric of reality. Sasha says, reading both fantasy and contemporary, writing contemporary, unless it's
I was thinking peanut butter.
Peanut butter?
I'm not sure what it is.
Picture book.
Yeah.
picture book.
Picture book.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we're actually getting... Oh, wow. Okay. Katie.
Hi.
Hi. Which genre, contemporary or fantasy, do you have more of an affinity for and why? And kind of treat it right now like, have you ever taken one of those mental health tests where they're like, in the past 2 weeks, how often have you, and then it's like, had worries about the state of the world or felt like you were pointless? That's how I'm feeling right now. In the past 2 weeks, which genre do you have more of an affinity for? Give us some balance to the conversation.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting.
Oh, because
I personally
too.
Yeah. So I personally think I enjoy fantasy and being a fantasy writer way more than I enjoy being a contemporary writer.
Mm-hmm.
However, writing contemporary is so fucking easy.
So then
that
why
I
do
really
you think your enjoyment, like when you say enjoyment, do you say you actually get more enjoyment out of writing fantasy than contemporary, or are you saying you enjoy the ideal of being a fantasy writer versus the ideal of calling yourself a contemporary writer?
I think it's the latter. I like the ideal of being a fantasy writer because writing fantasy is fucking hard. It's really difficult, but there is a certain freedom to... Go ahead, Steve.
Can I just say that all writing is hard? I think like you're shitting on contemporary writing here.
No,
I'm not shitting on
I think she's talking about her experiences. I mean, think about how quickly she has written her past contemporary projects. And I don't think that's true for everyone. I think that there are going to be some people who live better and write better in magical worlds. I think she's just saying personally for her, fantasy is a difficult genre to write. And contemporary, she's found a creative flow.
It just felt like she was saying that contemporary is so easy to write, and like, you know,
For her.
But that's just my
yeah.
experience.
But I was getting the general term, not I was getting the royal we, not the
Oh,
not the I, Catherine the Queen.
Well, maybe
well, I
again,
find it.
I said this. I don't know the exact date. We're gonna make one up. I said this on March 13th, 2022, to writing mom Samantha L. Nassett in the comments. Anytime we say anything, never assume we're making generalizations. Always assume we are talking about personal experience. And I think we're all gonna get along better when we do that, because none of us are experts. We're all just speaking from our own experience. So there we go. And I feel like that's approaching the conversation in better faith, because as soon as you start accusing people of like making general, you know, assumptions, then the conversation starts breaking down. So none of us are doing that.
Yeah. For me, as someone who has written fantasy literally my entire life, I only have ever had one other contemporary idea, and it died in the like thinking development stages. So I never got to actually like physically write that idea out. This is my first experience actually writing a fantasy or a contemporary, writing a contemporary. So for me, the contemporary was supremely easy because I didn't have to make my shit up. But I love making the shit up, and I love doing those things. It's just supremely difficult and takes a lot longer. So there's a lot more time that I have had to invest in fantasy as opposed to contemporary. So I think my affinity, I think I'm like Anna, where Anna was saying about how on a line level, contemporary is like more her jam because it's easier to write. So I think like writing a contemporary for me is a lot easier and a lot more, I have a lot more of an ease to it, as opposed to fantasy where I have to work a lot harder in order to get the same amount of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Great. Does that make sense to you, Devasia?
It does. Makes a lot of sense.
And do you see yourself, though, as you explore this contemporary field that you're in, do you have like the emotional pull to return to fantasy?
I do, which is why I think I haven't been reading or watching a lot of stuff, because I don't really read contemporary. I think I've read like only a couple of contemporary romances. The Brown Sister series, which I will never shut up about because I think they're amazing, I love that series. But there's never been another, or I shouldn't say never. At the moment, the books that I'm like going to be reading that are contemporary are more for research. It's not because I want to read them. Whereas like with my fantasy, I want to read fantasy books because I want to return to the genre. Like I watched Stranger Things last week, and I was like, oh, I'm ready to return to this fantasy world because, I mean, Stranger Things is like fantasy sci-fi, but regardless, it was like, I really feel a pull back to it. I just think I was burnt out for a while on fantasy. So I really do want to return to fantasy. I will return one day. It's just, Cruel Summer lives rent-free in my brain. So.
Gotcha. Thank you, Catherine. Violet says, answer both.
Thank you, face.
Martha says, I read and write mostly for escapism, so I definitely lean towards fantasy. I think that's it. It feels like one of those things that's obvious, but also I think it might be worth exploring of why do we consider fantasy escapism? I know that sounds kind of like a stupid question. Like, it's like, well, duh. But also, why is that everybody's blanket? You know, why not write travel novels of like going to different, you know, places? Why is it the escapism so wholly? It has to be a completely different world. I don't know. I just think that's interesting.
Hudson always brings this up. There's a quote from Neil Gaiman about how fantasy books don't teach you how to like defeat a dragon. Don't tell you that dragons exist. They tell you that dragons can be defeated, and dragons being a metaphor for real world problems. So I think for a lot of fantasy, especially as we grew up, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I grew up reading fantasy. So I grew up escaping into it as a child. And I think that's similar for a lot of us, but it's it takes real world issues and like real world things that we're dealing with and like metaphorizes them, and then the characters can defeat them in a metaphorical way, so we don't have to be as close to like, say, a novel about actually dealing with real world shit.
But so that's kind of the point that, I mean, this kind of getting into the second question a little bit, but like, but then is that really escapism, you know, or is that just us, you know, putting a filter over things so we can explore it in a different and safer avenue? Like, I don't know. The question isn't fully formed in my head. There's a vague little there. I don't know.
I guess it depends on what your fantasy or versus what your like what fantasy or contemporary books are you reading? Because you can read a fantasy that's like just pure fun and stuff, but then there's also fantasies that are like about war and like death and oppression and slavery and shit. And then there's contemporaries like rom-coms where there's no real world stakes. You don't have to deal with any of the shit. Like, that's why I love the Chloe Brown books and those books, because I mean, they deal with real world stuff, but like in a fun, quirky romance way.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on what book you're reading.
Steger, Devesha, do you have any addendums?
No.
I think. Nope, never mind.
She doesn't think. Head empty, no thoughts.
I don't think.
Well, get your gears turning, girl, because you're next. Contemporary definitely from Becca. Contemporary definitely comes easier to me. Even in my fantasy books, all the characters come from a contemporary world. It's easier to connect with the characters, I guess. But I love reading both. Becca, I love that perspective. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting. It is. It's sort of like fan fiction in a weird way, right? You know how with fan fiction you don't have to do a ton of setup because everybody already knows these characters. If you want to write a fantasy book, but you start your characters, if it's like a portal fantasy and you start your characters in the normal world, our world, hashtag all worlds are beautiful. And then it's kind of like that. You don't have to do this whole setup of explaining. If you say this character is from your world, then we know their past for the most part. We know the kind of experiences that they've had, and then you can throw them into the fantasy setting and explore that. But yeah, because they're, you know, when you open up a book and it's in a completely different world, we don't know the social structures. We don't know the pressures that are on individual people. And, you know, so yeah, that's interesting. That's a really interesting point. Emily says, fantasy. I love history, but also real life sucks. So made up world that's kind of based on our past, but with dragons and shit is great. That is great. Emily, do you have a favorite example of this? Do you have a favorite fantasy series that you feel like does a good blend where it's, I know the classic example that I know of because I'm a fantasy plebeian is Game of Thrones, but let us know as a more educated fantasy consumer. Grayson says, I'd say I have more affinity for contemporary. Oh, look at our contemporary friends coming in late in the conversation. I like it. It's creating a good flow. Oh God. More affinity for contemporary because that's what I write now, but I have a few fantasy ideas on the back burner, eyeballs. Oh, sorry, Grayson. I got to your comment almost half an hour late. You're not here, but everybody, Grayson will be streaming at 3 if you want to say hi. Gay's got 612 words. I love my little depressed scrunlies. My darling, I'm so sorry. I don't know what that word means. Lexi says, I got myself set up. Oh, this is a haul. Everybody do it for the sprint. Lexi got herself set up for the morning with coffee and what do we call this? Poot leaf? I'm hosting a book club for Tender is the Flesh on Tuesday, so I should probably start it soon. Yeah, probably, babe. Get to reading. Get to reading. Crystal checked on my bun. Love that. Making some hamburger buns. The time just went off, so I gotta check them again. But watched some of last night's Critical Role. Oh, Emily wants to know if you're all just spread around the same house. I don't know why, but I find that hilarious.
We are indeed. We're at like points of a triangle. Devation's over there. Steve's over there. I'm here.
I have visual
Anyway.
on both.
And I'm about 700 miles away. It's a big house. Kelly's in the midst of making brownies. Lexi says, to be fair, I'd be okay with that. Katie, tell your mom to look me up. Okay, sorry guys, none of this is in reference to the conversation. So we're gonna go back to Grape
Wait.
Fry.
Michael
we-
had an answer
Oh, where? Wait. Okay.
under Lexi's 2 comments.
Thank you. Michael says, contemporary. I read a lot of fantasy when I was young, but now contemporary is just more my jam. Oh, I wish you would have. Can you expand? Why? Why do you think this switch happened? Do you think that there was something in you as a child that wanted to escape, as people have been saying, and now that you're more settled into adulthood, you're more interested in exploring the nuances of our actual world? I would love to know if you've analyzed it or thought about it, why you've had this switch. Okay. Nice stall tactic, Devasia, but now
I just didn't want him to feel
No.
excluded.
No, that's
Lex's
completely
comment was right
legitimate.
before his.
No, that's legitimate, and I appreciate you issuing me back. So, which genre, Devasia, contemporary fantasy, do you have more of an affinity for, and why? And again, as I said with Catherine, this is within the past couple of, analyze yourself right now, and also over years and years, but also think about what's going on right now.
Well, I think I'm not gonna think about what's going on right now. I'm gonna think about the lifespan of my writing. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna
You are
not
free to do
focus
that.
it. I'm gonna widen
Broaden.
out.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you. I think I have more of an affinity for contemporary writing wise, like
Okay.
Anna and both Katie said. I feel like my writing is better initially at the first draft stage when I'm writing in contemporary. But I get most of my ideas that are fantasy ideas, and I've never really been able to stick through a contemporary project. So I would say, like, on the line level, prose level, I have a natural affinity for like contemporary. But on the idea generation front and the motivation to write the idea, the affinity is toward fantasy.
That's so interesting to have that kind of distinction of on a prose level, it's contemporary, and on ideas level, it's fantasy. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I would say because when I've written my snippets of contemporary, it's kind of a little easier to get into that character's head because they're in this world. I already got a basis of the environmental factors that have shaped them and stuff, whereas in fantasy you have to create the environmental factors that shape them, and
Yeah, that's interesting.
it takes a little bit longer to get into the character's head for me in a fantasy because of that.
So have you ever considered what we were talking about earlier? I think it was Crystal who's the person who said they throw people from Becca. Have you ever thought about something like that, like a portal fantasy where it's a modern person being thrown into a fantasy world?
No, only because I don't particularly like portal fantasy.
Well, then there you go. Is Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe a portal fantasy? Because they literally go through a portal. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha. So I guess, I'm gonna put pressure on it a little bit, but you're welcome to back off. But why did you want to look at the broad and not at the narrow scope of what you're writing right now?
Because I'm barely writing right now. There's nothing to narrow in on.
That's not true. I mean the barely writing part, but there's their projects, just because you're stuck doesn't mean you're not involved. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And is that true? Are you really barely doing anything? Don't you have multiple different stories?
Hey. What up, Steve?
Can I also just say that it's ironic that you say you don't like portal fantasy when your literal project right now is based off of Peter Pan, which is a portal fantasy?
Yeah, it is. Mean of you to
So
say that.
what about? But I also like. I mean, Peter Pan obviously isn't contemporary, but like it's something from our world that you're pulling influences from. Like, are you leaning into that to create your fantasy? And do you have an affinity for pulling from not classics for this example, but not always classics, doesn't have to be.
Yes, I think I do pull from other sources, other mediums
Yeah.
to, create my fantasy and generate those ideas. But I don't think about it in the same perspective as like the portal fantasy thing, because they're all already in the world.
Yeah,
No
that's
one's,
true.
no one's taking anyone to, what is the island called?
Neverland.
There we go. No one's taking anyone there. They're already just.
Also, just realizing that you and me are doing the same thing, where we're taking a portal fantasy and making it non-portal.
Literally. That's what made me think of it, because Wallace said Narnia, and I was like, wait, Peter Pan is also a portal fantasy.
That's funny. Devesha, do you have any other thoughts?
Any other thoughts? There was a comment that I wanted to say something about. Hold on. I should be a little bit more prepared.
Recently, or
yes, it was a more recent comment. So maybe I'll just wait to say my thing when it gets there. Nope. Case adjourned.
wait, who is it?
I don't know. I saw it briefly, and then the things jumped.
Oh,
So when you get to it, I'll probably remember my statement.
when I get to it tomorrow.
That's a big probably.
Yeah.
And if you remember your statement by then.
Okay. So, there's been a lot of conversations about things that we've touched on, so I do want to approach them. Whatever. In my brain, I'm like, oh, we should do another sprint, but whatever. Okay. Lexi says contemporary rom-coms are definitely our best sellers in the store, and the agents I work with represent more romance than anything else. 2022 is the year of the rom-com. There you go. Right from the horse's mouth.
Do we think that's like a result of the current world climate?
Possibly, yes.
Like how fantasy had a
probably.
huge influx after like World War II and the Cold War. Maybe rom-com is the modern day fantasy.
I think that's a good point.
I also,
As well as Frozen.
Nope.
Okay, no.
just thinking. I
It was
also
a long time
think that
between blinks. Sorry.
I thought you were going to say a long time without her talking.
It's been 10 seconds. Wow. Wallace, are you alive?
she made it.
I hadn't seen her blink in a while. Katie, sorry.
Oh, you're good. I just think with Book Talk, rom-coms have become a lot more like mainstream, almost like they've become more within the public consciousness, because I'm pretty sure romance has been one of the best-selling genres for like decades. I don't think this is a new thing. I think
Wouldn't
romance
that,
has always sold.
per definition, make it mainstream?
But not talked about. Something can be extremely popular, but if it's not discussed and talked about, then I don't know if you can officially define it as mainstream, you know?
Plus, with romance, there's a shit ton of stigma that still exists around romance, and women are oftentimes shamed for reading romances, so we don't talk about it. But women still will buy them. Just because you're buying them, it doesn't mean it's not. Like, if you look at the best New York Times bestseller list, which, again, is rigged, but that's exactly why I bring it up, because you didn't see a lot of romances on it the last several decades. But if you look at the USA Today list, which is literally about book sales, the majority of it is romance. It's just not being talked about. And I think with our generation, this social media generation, we're destigmatizing the reading of romance and erotica. So I think that's why it's looking like it's blooming. But in reality, I think people I think romance is just as popular as fantasy for decades.
Maybe it's a cultural thing, because I've always like romance has always been a huge part of like my knowledge of the literary genre, and if anything, fantasy has been the one that's like kind of frowned upon and stigmatized.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
maybe it's
That is
just
interesting.
either like cultural thing, or just like obviously we're all just limited by our own personal experiences.
That is interesting, though.
That is
Maybe it is culture. Huh.
But I do 100% agree that it is a stigma about romance. Reading in general is frowned upon.
It's true.
Is it?
Fantasy and romance.
Frowned upon?
I mean, frowned upon is a strong word, but it's like, it's like literary fiction. That's where it's at, quote unquote.
Well,
Oh,
I
okay,
frown
yeah.
at people who read literary fiction. I frown at them.
I think in the mainstream hierarchy, it's like literary and then genre, but genre-wise, like fantasy and then romance.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
But yes, I just think that romance being stigmatized is part of the patriarchy.
Of course.
Yeah. Yep.
Kelly says, fantasy gal through and through, only have one contemporary project and it's not finished yet, but my fantasy backlog is there. Yeah, that's fair. Miranda says, the problem is that I don't have anything that introspective or interesting to say. First of all, rude. Second of all, I'm just going to finish reading
Untrue.
this. I just don't like fantasy. I do like escapism, but I like escapism grounded in a contemporary world. Why don't you like fantasy? Is it just too much for you to assimilate yourself into the world and kind of get familiar with it? Or is it that you find it hard to relate to? I'd love to know further on this.
Can we reframe the question for Miranda?
Yeah.
Is your affinity more toward romance or thriller, mystery, suspense, Miranda?
Yeah.
Which comes
That's a good one.
easier to you, do you think?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Lexi. Miranda says, the thing that's so funny to me is y'all loving fantasy for the escapism as though contemporary rom-coms aren't escapism. I think I said this after you posted, but yeah, I agree. I think there are lots of ways to escape, and I think it's funny that that's the one everybody says is why they go for it, is because it's to escape. Crystal is a rebel all the way. Lexi is referring back to my question about how she's neutral on both, in that she says, I don't particularly search out either of these genres. That's interesting. Miranda says, if your answer is not fantasy, I swear to God, even your contemporary is still fantasy. I think this is to you, Katie.
It's not fantasy.
Well,
It
it's
is.
got that twist.
It's not. It's
But fantastical
here's the thing.
elements.
You could almost argue
Yeah.
it's science fiction, like a little bit, but not really, because it's not really about technology and human. Katie, you and I have already had this very long and yellow conversation, but
we don't have to get into it again.
We
I feel like we reached a good midpoint with it. I don't remember what that midpoint was, but we did.
I just remember there was a lot of yelling.
Yeah. Well, that always happens.
Gay says, besties, would you read a fic that's going to be over 500,000 words long, but split up into 6 acts? Because I think that's what I'm working right now. What I'm working on right now is a big boy. I'm going to be 100% completely honest with you. Unlikely. Unless it was like just the most powerhouse concept I've ever heard of. But I mean, granted, how long are some series of books? How many words is, sorry, my brain is on the fritz. Like Game of Thrones. I'm so sorry to all the people I know that are watching this who absolutely hate Game of Thrones, that I keep bringing it up, but that's got to be over 1 million words, and people definitely would read that. So,
But is this like in one continuous story, or could you divide it in series? Because I would not read a 500K book. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but like,
if it's
a series,
500 books,
yeah, or like
I would, gaze. I have definitely already done that, but I think it's easier if you do split it up into like 6 different fics in the same series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's more bite-sized, chunkable. Because as someone who binges, I feel like I could not get past trying to binge 500 words. But if it's like one fic, like 100,000 words or whatever, 500 divided by 6 or whatever, but the fuck. I could sit down and read that, and then I'd be ready to read the next chunk at a different time.
Hope that was helpful. Not discouraging. Lexi says, I will also say that I prefer to be a contemporary author than a fantasy author because it seems so hard to create a world from the ground up that people actually want to learn more about. Yeah, that's fair.
Mhm.
I think that was the comment I was looking at earlier.
Oh, then would you like to say?
Yes. This is part of the reason why I think my affinity is more toward prose levels, more toward contemporary, because it's hard to create a world from the ground up.
But I would say though that, and granted, as I said before, I'm a fantasy plebe, but I think I particularly appreciate even when we're in a fantasy world, the prose level isn't full of fantasy jargon. And I think, if you allow yourself almost to write with a contemporary-ish mindset, like you don't want people saying the word tweet in your fantasy world, but if you give them a voice that sounds very natural to your contemporary reader, that might be a better reading experience for them, at least, rather than filling it with a ton of new words that they have to learn really fast and just kind of slowly trickle it in, I think. But that could be the worst advice in the world.
I also think it's funny though, because a lot of people have been saying that they love to write fantasy based on like real world stuff, just changing it. Like, that's just kind of funny to me of like, we're not really building from the ground up. We're pulling from other places and that are contemporary or, maybe not even modern, but within our world. And then just adding a little flair, a little spice, if you will, to, but I think a good fantasy needs to have touchstones with reality in order for a person to actually be able to connect and actually give a shit about what you're writing.
Fair enough. Danny says, I disagree. I find fantasy so much easier to work on than contemporary stuff. Again, I'm very interested in everybody's nuances of why this is, Danny. Why do you think that is? Violet says, contemporary is hard, getting facts right instead of making stuff up. That's interesting.
I will say with that, that's why I will never write historical fiction. Because I will not get those facts right.
That's fair. Anytime Katie's like, ooh, I like the aesthetic of this historical era, so I'm going to make a fantasy world that has that aesthetic, and then I can just make stuff up.
Yep.
But at the same time, though,
That's what I did.
Well, here's my thing, though, and this could be wrong, but I suspect as you further into your author career that, no, I'm not going to use that word. That tendency towards cutting corners will probably fade because I think it will become important for you to make even if you keep it a fantasy world, I think it will become important for you to keep the aesthetic consistent and feel fleshed out. And I think doing the research and putting in that effort improves the writing, even if it's not always 100% historically accurate. And I think you do that, Katie. I mean, once we were talking, you were like, oh, I just spent the past 25-minute sprint looking up, what was it, like blood typing or what was it? No, it was something like, it was for Be Gay, Salt, Crime, Drink Blood. And it was like a specific name for a weapon or something. I can't remember, but
yeah, I mean, I've done that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think
there is a lot more pressure, I think, within writing historical fiction to get everything correct because I mean, for me personally, I believe if you're going to write historical fiction and you're going to write that, you have to be accurate. Like you have to do your research. You have to do that shit because I personally believe it's really important. Otherwise, just fucking call it a fantasy. So while I really do try,
fantasy? Because I feel like I have more leeway with historical fantasy.
What's historical fantasy? How do you define that?
Historical fantasy?
Is it just like Bridgerton, but actually set within Victorian London, but they have magic?
Like, has anyone read Nadine Brandis? Like,
oh yeah, okay, like her Fox series or whatever about.
Yeah.
Okay, I've never read those, so I can't really comment.
But
historical fantasy is a category of fantasy and genre of historical fiction that incorporates fantastic elements such as magic into a more realistic narrative.
Interesting.
But how does that differ from there is much crossover with other subgenres of fantasy. Those classed as Arthurian, Celtic, or Dark Ages could just as easily be placed in historical fantasy. Stories fitting this classification generally takes place prior to the 20th century.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if, like, as an example, if someone was writing a story about the Salem witch trials, but they were actually witches and had like actual magic, and that is definitely historical, but it's obviously a fantasy. So I'm wondering if that's maybe kind of what.
I guess the
Is that what
difference
you're
is just
saying, Tanisha?
What I'm saying is that I feel like with historical fantasy, I'm willing to overlook like your facts
Inconsistencies.
being a little bit inconsistencies, your facts being a little bit wrong
Yeah,
because that's the fantasy element.
yeah. But I
I
still
feel
think
like if it's changing something, like if you change a historical fact in order to fit with the magic system you've brought in, that's okay. But if you're like, I'm gonna just say that they wore this specific kind of pant because I want them to wear this specific kind of pant, even though that specific kind of pant hasn't been invented yet, that will irk me personally.
yeah, like if you write a story, I mean, this is taking it to an extreme, but if you write a story about the Salem witch trials and they all are using iPhones, you're like, what?
Hello?
Like,
Historical science
let me just
fiction.
call Sarah Good up and see if she was out in the woods dancing with the devil.
Let me tweet. I saw Goody Proctor.
I don't want to start drama, but
Yeah.
No tea, no shade.
actually, I love that.
From
Not
like
gonna
a
lie.
historical standpoint. That was-
Right? I think I kind of love that.
Yeah. All right. Case, I know it's been an hour since we've sprinted. I apologize. I hope everybody's at least enjoying themselves. I am currently 30 minutes behind in the comments. Gay says, I think the hardest thing to work on is historical fiction because that shit happened and was recorded differently depending on who you ask. You know what's amazing, you guys? I'm so far behind in the comments that I'm at comments that are relevant to the conversation we're just now having because the conversation has gone full circle. Lexi says, every time I've tried to write fantasy, I've given up within days. Emily says, contemporary is so hard. I struggle to write it so much. See, there you go. It's different for every different person. Marta says, you were also writing a contemporary about something you were already very familiar with. I think this is to you, Katie. I can imagine it'd be harder if you needed to do more research. That is very true.
You know what? Yes, that is a very good point that I will amend myself. If I was writing about figure skating or rugby, impossible. But I've literally been playing tennis my entire life, so it's a good point. I concede.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got to the conversation about escapism. Wallace says, I mean, for me, escapism isn't just real world issues. I find even the grim stuff escapist. My thing is disconnecting from this world. I don't want to think about this world, you know? I get it. Escapism, coping mechanism, it's all the same, really, Emily says. Apparently, Miranda and I were in agreement. I think this is over. Contemporary can be escapism too. Stumbling Bear says, I'm not an escapist reader. I read sci-fi and fantasy for enjoyment, but also for a way to reform my thinking about real-world issues. I love this. What a unique and, like, just that's not something that anybody's commented before. I think that's very interesting. Wallace says, I would not call the 5th season easy or without real-world issues, but it's immensely escapist for me because I can see people taking actionable change against injustice, Yeah, that's fair. Before the stream ends, can you guys come together? I would go nuts for that. Maybe. That's up to them. I can't force it. Emily says, calling me an educated fantasy consumer is so far from the truth. I do love you wrote an entire fantasy book, Emily. I do love Game of Thrones.
Which, if you don't mind me doing this, Steve.
Oh, Ashwood and Brimstone. Everybody,
Everywhere where books are sold.
That's for Emily and her book. Honestly, the Poppy War is amazing and probably my favorite. I've never heard of that. Jessica says it's not in reference because we got bored. I don't know what this means.
I didn't know what that meant when she
I'm so
commented
far
it.
removed from the conversation at this point. Hold on, guys. I apologize if I'm about to. Oh, yay! It's past 8,000 words. I'm gonna scroll a bit.
Miranda was really pressed to skip her fanfic comment.
I'm sorry. People are saying I didn't skip it. I had it up there for a long time. Katie just refused to acknowledge it.
You didn't read it aloud.
it was up there for you to comment on, Katie, if you chose.
You didn't read it aloud, so I can't read.
Because I was trying to be a good friend and I was trying to give you the court, and I didn't want to force you to comment on it if you didn't want to. So
I can't read.
stop criticizing me.
Literate.
Or I'm
Okay,
gonna
Jared 19.
Kelly says, "Excuse me, Porter Fantasy. That's what it's called. Why am I just now finding out about this?" Today I
FYI,
learned.
Kelly, you're writing a Portal Fantasy.
Oh my gosh, when were we being mean to Grape? I'm sorry if I was being mean to Grape. I didn't mean to be.
You're always
I think it was.
I think it was when Stieg said, "I'm not always mean to you. How dare you?"
Yes, you are. You make me self-reflect, and that's mean.
Oh, okay. Well, but that's also good for you. Gay says, when the Portal Fantasy is a one-way ticket and the prophecy they're supposed to fulfill is kind of fucked. It cannot be done. Is that what you're saying you like, or what?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Jess says, I read a rom-com last night, saw for 2 hours on a couch, so like highly recommend. So last night, let me get this clear. You both read a book and listened to a song and then texted us about it, about having a mental breakdown. Are you okay? Are you okay?
Mm-mm.
You need to get to Pennsylvania fast. Get with the people who love you.
Yeah, give us 3 days and we'll fix you, Jess.
Yep.
That's how it works. Jess says, bodice rippers and erotica have been super popular for decades, but I think rom-coms specifically are becoming more popular. Romance was all my grandmother had on her bookshelves. The first time I ever read erotica was up here. I was 6 years old, and I would pull out. My aunts would have bookshelves full of bodice rippers, and I loved looking at the front covers because it was the women in the beautiful dresses and the man with like his shirt off and his hair flowing. And I'd be like, oh, and I would pick the book based off of how pretty the dress was. I was probably older than 6. I don't think I could read that well when I was 6, but I was young. I was less than 10 when I read my first one. But yeah, they just straight up had those out and about. Romance is the powerhouse of the publishing industry, but it does suck that people get shamed for reading it. Yeah, it does. People are silly. Romance being stigmatized as part of the patriarchy. Yep. Men don't want us to read and see women getting mutual love, trust, and respect from books because then we might demand it from them in real life. Both of those are genre fiction, guys, not literary fiction. Both of what? Both contemporary and fantasy. Yeah, I know. I don't assume all contemporary is literary. I don't know what you're asking here. Sorry, Lexi. Emily says, definitely cultural. Fantasy is one of the worst performing genres in Australia. Whoa, that's crazy. What is one of the best? Miranda says, I found out people who only read nonfiction. I have noticed I have this weird quirk where, because I'm so afraid of writing a self-insert, that I sometimes give my characters completely opposite traits as me. And so not on purpose, but I've noticed on 3 separate projects, I have had a main character who exclusively or like textbooks or reference books.
Oh no.
What row?
She is
Wally.
frozen now.
She broke.
That's all for today. No, I'm kidding. Miranda, why is Miranda?
Oh, she's moving 3.
She's back.
Oh, she's gone.
Oh, she's gone again.
No.
Let me see where she was at. Let's just continue on with the comments, even though I can't pull them up.
But yeah, to Emily's comment, it's the same in Norway. 'Cause fantasy, like Norwegian fantasy, is doing atrocious. But like the Scandi noir crime books, huge. Historical fiction, huge. Romance, is a pretty big genre too. So it's definitely a market thing, I think. And me and Emily being of different cultures and than the American market, definitely. I mean, obviously, both me and Emily read a lot of American literature, but it definitely is like, it gives a dissonance between like your experience and our experience of the market, just because, the nature of being raised, being raised readerly in different markets.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think that's really interesting.
So it seems like the Australian and the Norwegian market are similar because Emily says crime thrillers are the best performing genre in Australia.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that sounds correctly.
Hello?
Hello.
Whoa.
This is. I think we need to jump into a sprint because my my everything is struggle busting. Okay, but for real, there are literally over 100 comments left. I don't want to jump through a sprint and ignore all of them. I feel like there's such amazing conversation happening. I'm so sorry, guys. You should just call this Sprint and Shop Talk so you only have to do one.
I have proposed this before.
That's true. I mean, we could. I don't care. Miranda
I
says
care.
it's the jargon. I can't get over the jargon. The place names, absolutely not. I don't want a proper noun I've never heard of before. Is that reductive? Yes, but true. Also, yes. Yes. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm skipping so many comments.
As long as you buy my book, Miranda, I don't care if you read it or not.
Oh my god. I'm just gonna randomly click on comments. Sorry. So there are some historical fictionist plots going on in my contemporary store right now, and you're so right, Katie. It is stressful to make sure you have all the facts right. Marta says the only time I've read historical fiction was as coursework for history class at school, where they then had to analyze stuff from a historical standpoint. So the idea of writing historical fiction just outright terrifies. Yeah. I apologize for not addressing your fanfiction comment. We got Danny. Violet says, sounds like the Tabitho sequel that no one asked for.
Prequel. Salem witches with iPhones tweeting about Goody Proctor getting down with the devil.
To be fair, nobody asked for Tabitho either. Well, I guess one person asked for Tabitho.
Actually, literally someone did ask for it.
I will not make Katie pay for her crimes. You meant prequel. Okay. Had a quick send because I live near the sea. Flex. And now I'm back. What did I miss?
Nothing.
A lot. I'm sorry.
The book.
Contemporary is easy. While you're writing fanfic, maybe write a mystery thriller and get back to me. Wow, that was spicy. There's some attitude there. While you're writing fanfic, maybe.
Hello, Miranda. I reframed the question for you, and I never got my answer.
Wallace says, I don't think at all it is easy. I think it's hard as hell, and that's part of why I don't write it. I overthink the crap out of it and end up frozen. Also, mystery/thrillers are extremely hard in any genre. Agreed. I gave up on mine. Gays painted bodice rippers are now extinct. Remember what they took from us. I know.
It's true.
Miranda's going to start throwing books at y'all. They were so beautiful. They were. Anyway, I don't know what part I got cut off, but I apologize. I don't know what part of my random story I got booted from my internet. Crime thrillers are the best performing genre in Australia. It takes up half the freaking bookstore. That is so interesting. Not to generalize, but was no, that's so awful. It was a joke I was going to make about how Australia was populated by criminals, so then it makes sense why crime thrillers are their faves. But it's that's been many generations since then. You're not all criminals. You're lovely people. I don't know. Emily says romance does well here as well, always at the front of the bookstores. Lexi says, don't worry, Wallace. I was just setting up a joke about how people think genre fic is less worthy than literary fic. I promise. I know you know the difference. I know you know I know. Wallace says, also that comment about reading to form your ideas, that is something I agree with wholeheartedly, but could not articulate.
Same.
Okay.
I'm just going to bring it to the DMs, Miranda.
Danny says, my local library here is about 70% mystery/thrillers, and I have no idea who decided that, but it feels strange for being here. All right. Shall we do at least one more sprint?
We shall.
Let's do one more sprint.
Okay. Let's see what the playlist is going to give us. It's going to be a Zodiac timer, maybe?
What's the 6-minute pride timer?
No, it's going to be a
Halloween
timer. Everybody can get hyped. Hold on. My family legitimately wouldn't be in Oz if one wasn't an Irish comic. So fair. Okay, good. I'm so glad. I got worried I was going to really offend you by saying that, but that's amazing. And we love you even more for it.
Bye, gays.
Bye.
Bye, gays.
I know.
Violet, everywhere.
I'm trying. All right. Before we start our next sprint, the next question, and potentially the final question, we'll see, is what themes do you typically explore when you write contemporary and fantasy? And this is kind of, I'm going to prompt everybody a little bit here in the comments as you give your comments. And if you only write in one of these genres, I would just love an exploration of what themes you generally write. But if you do write in both and feel that you explore separate themes, I would also love you to kind of analyze that and give it nuance of why you think you use one genre to explore one kind of theme and one genre to explore another. So that's that. And we're going to share our screen. And it's going to be a 25-minute Halloween timer because that's what the random gods decided.
Yay.
All right. Is everybody ready?
I
Yeah.
Happy
Let's do it.
sprinting.
Wallace, you are unmuted.
That was such a loud crunch.
Crunch ASMR.
Hello.
Yeah.
How did y'all do that, Smith? Katie?
I got some water, stay hydrated, and then wrote 23 words and was like, ooh, do I write this extra scene of the character going to Tesco with his sisters? And the answer to that is no, but I want to. So I thought about that for a while.
Are we not
Steve?
going to talk about the fact that you and Miranda sent 500 messages to each other?
Oh, that's true. I did answer for my crimes in her DMs.
Not to expose you, but
Which I don't think
when in Rome.
When in Rome. Which you did defend. You did defend me. You were like, stop getting on her.
Y'all have a group chat that I'm not part of? What the? I didn't get.
He was walking
messages.
past me. He was walking past
Oh.
me while I was recording a voice message to Miranda in our group chat. Or not group chat, our DMs. Oh,
She cannot see.
she's like,
But yeah,
hello.
I did all right.
See?
I took 10 minutes to answer the questions in writing. And then I got, let's see how many words I got. 148 for the project. But I had to go back and do some fine tuning of my plot points because I literally came up with the next section last night with Katie. So,
Ooh, getting some good
It was a fun
brainstorming
time.
done together.
It was so fun.
yeah,
That's the power
just,
of writing.
you know, I need to. She's basically my supervisor, so I need to check with her. Like, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Is this a good plot point? Is this fantasy? Am I doing the thing now, mommy?
Yeah.
Nope, hate
No.
that.
No. No. I was with you until there, and then no.
Yeah. Grape, how did you do?
It would be a +4. I wasn't counting the words,
Okay.
but I wrote
Okay.
them.
Nice. And do you feel happy and satisfied with that 25-minute sprint?
Yes.
Good. I'm glad. All right.
How'd you do?
in
Miss
your
Wally?
cinnamon?
Oh,
toast crunch
I
doodles?
struggled with the internet. I got myself a little bit of a snack, and I'm currently reading, funnily enough, a contemporary rom-com for a very far in the future video for my channel. So, yes.
Oh, okay. I know what this is.
But now that we've all given our updates, Stieg, what themes do you typically explore when you write contemporary or fantasy? And what are the nuances within those themes? And why do you think you assign one theme to one genre and vice versa?
To set the standard again, I explore a lot of family trauma in my fantasy writing, particularly. No correlation to real life. It's fine, but it's a lot of.
So we're telling
family-
lies on the internet today.
A lot
Lies
of
and
family
slander.
stuff going on. I mean, it wouldn't be a trouble stream without. So that's definitely one of the major themes I do. I also like I write exclusively queer main characters, so queerness is something I explore, and not homophobia, but the lack of homophobia in my fantasy worlds is something I like to. I enjoy to explore.
How do you explore a lack of something?
You just take it away, and then you see, okay, this is how the world would look without this thing in it. It's how I do it. I don't know.
And based on the project, does the way the world look differ, even though you're making the same change each time?
Surprisingly enough, not surprisingly enough, but interestingly enough, I guess, taking away homophobia does not affect my plots at all. It does not affect, like, it's just not an issue that gets like brought up. Like, yeah, I don't know how to articulate this thought, but I think that homophobia adds nothing to a literary body, unless it's, of course, an exploration of homophobia. But we've had enough of those, so.
And then how about contemporary?
In contemporary, it is. I briefly touched up on it earlier. It is like, because contemporary romance, it's about for me. It's about exploring like a lost youth that I never experienced, kind of mourning that, or making like not a testament, but it's exploring an experience that I never had, basically.
And why have you? I guess the question is do you see crossover there? Like, why do you? Again, I know you're very new to the contemporary realm, but why do you think you've used contemporary as a way of exploring your, lost childhood versus having explored that before in fantasy?
That is interesting. Thinking about it now, I do like also explore the loss of a childhood, like the loss of an innocent childhood in my fantasy, but it's definitely not the focus as it is in my contemporary. I'm hesitant to call it a project. It's just an idea at this point.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
It's definitely something I do in both projects, but it's very much the center stage of my contemporary project, as opposed to my fantasy project, which is more about, family and parental trauma.
Gotcha. Thank you for that well thought out and nuanced answer. Danny says, I've only worked on 2 contemporaries before and both explored themes of isolation and self-discovery, whereas my fantasies are all about relationships and interpersonal dynamics. What is that? The
That
noise.
is Kelly Wright's answer to the question.
No. Do you guys
Oh.
have a fighter jet flying over or something like that?
No, there was a car
truck
driving
went
past.
Oh, okay. Kelly says, I try to explore different levels of trauma with writing fantasy because
Oh, no.
Oh no.
Because I feel it's more of a safe space for me to play with my problem solving or answer a lot of what ifs. I feel like that's valid.
classic.
And I think that's true for a lot of us too. Oh, 3?
3? Y'all.
There she is.
We're gonna end soon because my internet is slowly degrading. We're gonna get through it though. What were you saying though, Stieg? I think you were giving context or giving.
I was just reading the rest of Kelly's comment.
Okay. Did you have a thought on it?
I think it's a valid thing to do. I think not just for fantasy, but I think a lot of authors explore trauma, either conscious or subconsciously or unconsciously in their writing. And I think that's a good, if you do it in a healthy way, it can be a good coping mechanism or a good exploration of trauma. But if you go into it subconsciously, no. Unconsciously, you know what I mean. If you go into it without thinking about it, I think it could be a very slippery slope into more, mental illness. Yeah.
Gotcha. Emily says she's going to bed, but her answer is grief is a massive theme in all of my writing, thanks childhood trauma, and also exclusion and mental health. My books are so happy. My writing is basically a coping mechanism. Gay says, my favorite themes to explore in fantasy is family and how it can both hurt and heal, interconnectivity of people, what it means to be a hero and leader, dealing with grief, destiny and what it means to break from it, love in all its forms, the struggle of letting go, even if it's for your own good. Ooh, I love that one. The bells are ringing. Somebody has died. R.I.P. Revelation and recognition.
Is it not just lunch?
Yeah, it's just there's 30 minutes to lunchtime. Gaze continues. Revelation and recognition of the worst part of oneself and how to deal with such a discovery. Magic as a means to reflect on your inner demons, overcoming past traumas to form a better future. Legacy and the burden of young heroes. Also forgiveness and redemption. I love it. I love that.
That's a lot.
That's an amazing trove. Amazing.
I now understand why you need 500,000 words.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening here, and we support it.
Too.
Miranda says, thinking about it, a lot of my themes often come down to power imbalances and people finding their power / using their voices for good. And I only explore that in contemporary, of course. Lexi says, when I write contemporary, I like to focus on complex familial relationships, on overcoming guilt and trauma, things plucked directly out of my life because that's what I know best. And then we're at the part where I was not muted. I apologize. And part 2 of Lexi's comment, I also like to include travel and contemporaries. I focus on lush, evocative descriptions.
I love that.
Jess says, I just did my St. Martin's Press influencer request for the winter season. Legitimately only requested adult romance books. Who even am I? Also had an arc of Well Traveled from Berkeley in my inbox this morning, so I guess I'm living my adult rom-com life over here. Yes, you are. All right. Kelly got some soda bread in the oven and brownies out and listened to a bit of chapter 5 of Inkheart. Oh my god, Kelly, I'm also the Nostalgia Train book club thing totally inspired me. And so I'm also listening to the audiobook of Inkheart. So it's been a good time. I listened to that as I was driving north. Miranda had a hearing. Danny ate some ice cream. Steve called in mid-voice memo. Wow. Love to be included in things. Thanks, guys. All right. Katerina.
Hello.
What themes do you typically explore when you write contemporary and fantasy?
Good question.
I know. Thank you.
It really is. Makes you think, which thinking today, not my vibe, but it's
How
fine.
dare I?
How dare you? How dare I talk about themes, even though I literally got a degree in it?
Yes, you on your bachelor's degree, it just says themes.
Themes. Honestly, would not be shocked. I think in fantasy, I struggle a little bit more with defining. Actually, I think I just struggle in general. Not even going to say fantasy. I struggle in general to define what kind of themes I'm writing with, because I think a lot of them are subconscious. It's mental illness, isn't it? To quote Steve. But I think a lot of my like specifically in the Wrath King, I think a lot of the reasons why I used blood magic was because I was exploring my own trauma with self-harm, and like the intention behind things like that. So, I mean, I explore themes of like revenge and death and dealing with trauma, as everyone says, because we all are just out here trying to use coping mechanisms the best way we can, which happens to be writing books and then hoping that people read them and see us. So I think in my contemporary, though, it's been more of an exploration in like love and like being deserving of love and accepting love, because both of the main characters in Cruel Summer are very against falling in love. The fuck was that?
Sorry.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry. There was just a really loud slamming door. It scared me. That's all. The wind. It's fine.
The wind.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think my contemporary is more about exploring those things, and because specifically because I'm writing contemporary romance, because I know contemporary comes in many different shapes, sizes, and forms. But in my romance, I'm obviously exploring romance themes and stuff like that. So,
and do you have a thought for why your exploration is partitioned in the way that it is?
I think when I write fantasy, I use fantasy as a way of filtering and putting a lens over all of these issues. I've talked about it before. I think maybe not on a stream, maybe just personally to y'all, but in fantasy, I oftentimes will explore things with magical elements, so I do not have to actually look at the physical things within our real world, but I can still explore them, if that makes sense. Like I can have an emotional distance from things, but still explore them. Whereas in contemporary, I have been leaning more into exploring things that are less metaphorical. Like these are literal things that people are experiencing, literal emotions, as opposed to using magic as a metaphor for trauma and revenge or whatever the heck theme you want to pull out of my books. So I think that's why it's separated. I think I started off with fantasy not only because I love fantasy, but also because it's a good way of being able to filter out having to be really close with the thing. Because when I write contemporary romance, I don't have the luxury of being able to, metaphorize these things. Like I actually have to That's not a word, but whatever.
Yeah, sure.
I actually have
It
to
is
explore
now.
these things with characters. It is now.
Mhm.
I actually have to explore them with characters and circumstances in real life, because despite what Miranda says, this book is a contemporary. The soulmate thing is not like, I can't use the soulmate. I can use the soulmate thing to explore love, but I can't use it to explore other emotions. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So I think that's why it's partitioned.
And do you think, like, so for fantasy, though, I'm assuming you write fantasy also because you enjoy the aspects of world building and falling into a fantasy world. Do you ever think that you would explore the themes you explore in contemporary in a fantasy world, and vice versa? Do you think you'd ever find a desire to explore the things you usually mask and metaphor in a fantasy world? Do you think you'll ever choose to explore that in contemporary?
I don't think I would explore the things that I'm exploring in fantasy. Well, that's not necessarily true, because I do explore like self-harm and stuff in some of the Cruel Summer universe, not Cruel Summer specifically, but the other one. But I do think, having written this contemporary series and this contemporary book, contemporary romance, has given me a better idea of how to convey and how to write and how to basically say the things that are intangible within our lives. So I'm hoping that transfers when I go back to fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can actually insert this like heart and this, you know, these themes and ideas and stuff, because I think that's something that a lot of my fantasy, specifically the Wrath King and the early draft of the Wrath King and currently with the Eclipse Project, is missing.
Oh, okay, that's
It's like
interesting.
these actual, you know, not, as you say, not pulling my punches, because I think I pull my punches on some of it. And using, you know, magic and fantasy metaphors and stuff is me pulling my punches.
I mean, is it like, I don't think inherently using metaphors is pulling a punch. I think it's a different way of explaining and examining something through a lens. But if you feel personally for you, you're using it as kind of that dilution of the exploration as a way of not fully getting all the way there, then that's, you know, a case by case thing, right?
Yeah, because I definitely use metaphor within my contemporary, my romance. I'm not, there's been many times where I've used fantastical descriptions to evoke something because that's just my style. But I do think there is an aspect of my fantasy books, specifically the Wrath King, early Wrath King, and then currently what I'm struggling with the Eclipse Project, is the fact that I don't think I am diving deep enough into the themes and exploring them in a non-metaphorical way. Because I think you can nail down and like talk about these things and be really close with it metaphorically. But I think for me, I am putting a filter over top of it, so I don't have to actually explore within myself what that actually means for me as the author. So.
Gotcha. Steger Devasha, do you have anything to add? Okay. Violet says, I guess in my rom-coms, I have a wealth and class as a theme. I love this. And in my more fantasy project, I guess womanhood and feminism. Okay, again, though, Violet, I'm going to ask, you know, why do you think there is a distinction between the two genres and why you explore things differently between the two genres? Because I feel like wealth and class is a great thing to explore within fantasy, and womanhood and feminism is also a great thing to explore in contemporary. So why do you specifically trend on isolating them between the two? Jessica says themes. What are those? Who writes themes? Who writes?
Feel that.
What?
I said I feel that.
I think, you know, themes don't have to be intentional. They can be things that you retroactively notice. Like I am always saying, oh my God, every story I write is just about an isolated woman. And that's completely true. Like anytime I come up with a new story, I'm like, this is so great and fresh and interesting and like totally a new area of writing for me. And then you really boil it down. It's like, oh, isolated woman feels regret over the fact that she didn't aspire or she didn't become all that she thought she could be, and then what does she do with that? You know, like that's always what the story is. So yeah, I don't think you
She
have
starts
to,
a writing Discord.
I don't think you have to like set out when you first start the story. This story, I'm going to explore X, Y, and Z. It can definitely be a thing as you look back on a draft and be like, wow, I was really working through some shit here. And that shit specifically was wealth and class or womanhood/feminism. Laura did some dishes and wrote up my Friday itinerary for AuthorTube writing comments. I thought you were like, you had your planner and you were like, wake up like in Hocus Pocus with her book. Anyway, sorry. That was just an interesting visual for me. Lexi says, before you guys leave, can we see the three of you one shot? She has asked now twice. Is it going to happen?
I guess.
Yes, no, maybe so.
I guess we'll find out.
I guess we'll find out. Michael is here for Inkheart. Stumbling Bear says, I do not write themes in my zero draft on purpose. When I revise, I see what comes out. That's another thing too. That's yes, like where you just write the zero draft and then you see, okay, this is what I explored. And now that I know that, as I revise, I can intentionally put the, push on the gas. Because I think in terms of what you were saying, Katie, about pulling your punches, I think especially as you're just exploring a story for the first time, everything's going to feel like a pulled punch because you don't even know what you're really trying to explore sometimes. And so sometimes
my punch is just not landing because there's nowhere for it to land.
Right. But you can at least see the direction that it's trying to go. Yeah. You can see the direction it's trying to go. And then as you revise, you can place the object that deserves to be punched in the path of the fist, you know?
Yeah. What a great I love this metaphor.
I fear the wind. Name that movie. I don't know. But yes, the love Dawson's Drop Slam store. That's funny. You've got me stumped. Yeah, I have no idea. It's old Jim, stepsister from Planet Weird. How interesting. I don't think you need to. I think instead of spending the time being insecure about it, you could just kind of contemplate what she's saying and think if you have, like, I think, she's not, I don't know.
If you have questions, don't just because I say big words does not mean I'm always accurately conveying what I'm trying to convey. Because
Katie's
I
wrong
personally,
like 80% of the time.
she is often. And I think honestly, more trying to convey ideas accurately to general public, especially when it comes to writing, where we all have different levels of understanding of literary stuff and like craft. I think being able to explore those ideas for everyone to understand is a lot more helpful than me just absolutely fucking going off with some random shit.
That's give Katie a math problem and that'll bring it back down to earth. There you go. Laura says, the theme in my adult sci-fi that's on the back burner is self-forgiveness. The main character is not responsible for what they did while under brainwashing, but it's still happened and people died. He has to forgive himself to start healing from the trauma, make amends, and move forward. Yep. Jessica says, I can't contemplate what she's saying when she uses big words and I don't understand the English.
Sorry.
Laura says, self-forgiveness/acceptance is something I've been working on personally, so it's interesting to explore in a sci-fi setting. All right, and Devesha.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, wait, that's adorable. Yeah, I love your hair today. Lexi's freaking out. Devesha, it's your turn, babe.
Oh God.
And you're gonna have the power of friendship. You're gonna have them walking you through it, so you have the strength to answer the question. What themes do you typically explore when you write contemporary/fantasy?
Jesus fucking Christ.
I would say I also explore religion in my story. So.
Oh no, I explore fucking Jesus Christ. No. Queerness.
Amazing.
Across the board, I feel like in both, there are a lot of themes that I think I write that overlap both contemporary and fantasy. Queerness, like Violet said, womanhood, I think definitely.
How have you explored womanhood?
By just writing bad bitches. shit, I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry. I totally interrupted you. You said, but I think
I think where they differ is that in contemporary, I focus on intrapersonal relationships, like self-realization, self-actualization, more individual trauma,
Yeah.
where in fantasy, it's more interpersonal relationships and like the collective trauma.
That's really interesting.
And like responsibility, familial obligations, I explore more in fantasy than I would in contemporary.
Would it be such a mindfuck if I also shut up on your screen?
It would, but there's a space for you, like right there.
Mm-hmm. So, you're going to give Lexi an aneurysm. Yeah. I'm literally dead. We witnessed history, folks.
Literally dead.
Literally dead. Wait, okay. So, do you have any thought? Like, do you think it's just kind of been coincidence that it breaks down that way, where it's interpersonal in fantasy and interpersonal in contemporary, or do you feel like, if you really think about it, that there's a reason for that?
I would have to do some more exploring on this question. I'm sure there is a reason.
Do you think it's kind of like through the lens that Katie offered, of that fantasy offers an extra layer of filter, and so it's a little bit easier to distance yourself from it, and that makes it a little safer to explore? And so, like, I guess in your own analysis of yourself, do you find more difficulty in thinking about your relationship with yourself, or your relationship and duty to the people around you?
Yes, I think it's more difficult in my relationship to myself as opposed to the relationship of me with others.
That's so interesting, because that's the one that you write in contemporary, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really interesting, because it seems different than what Katie was saying.
Yeah.
But then again, you most often write fantasy, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
And are you, like, what is the breakdown in terms of numbers? How many fantasy projects do you have versus how many contemporary that are active? Like, at least, like, you see as real potential.
Are we gonna classify contemporary fantasy as contemporary just across the board?
I would let it slide if it was contemporary fantasy in the way that Cruel Summer is contemporary fantasy, where you have one fantastical element, but everything else is very grounded in reality. But if it's something like, I don't know the Darker Shade of Magic series, but I know it's like magic in London, that would be fantasy, because that's like full on magic.
It's Tibefoe level.
Okay. Because see, I would put Tibefoe as fantasy, even though it's in a contemporary setting. Oh, Katie maybe disagrees with that. Well, but again, this isn't about definitions, but
okay, well then I'll just think about the two contemporaries that I, have started but not finished, that have no fantastical elements, as opposed to the 6 with fantastical elements.
Okay, so there's definitely like a heavy bias towards one.
Mm-hmm.
Which do you find more? Which themes, I guess, do you find more? Oh, okay, it's a two-part question. Okay. Which themes do you find easier to explore on the page? Inter or intrapersonal?
I guess intrapersonal.
Like with yourself?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Because I like the emotional, heavy-hitting scenes.
And you typically get those when you're having someone self-analyze themselves as opposed to a relationship with someone else?
Yeah.
Okay. So you enjoy writing those more, but looking at your backlog, you tend to more often do interpersonal within fantasy. Do you think there's a reason you keep going back to that and trying to re-explore and re-explore?
Wallace, why does everything have to turn into a therapy session? Jesus Christ.
It doesn't have to. You are free to request to not answer a question and we can just end the stream. It's fine.
No, she's not. No, I want to know the answer.
The answer is. What is the answer? The answer is I feel like I don't put enough into my own interpersonal relationships, probably. And so I want to write more of that. I don't know.
Do you find that writing it helps you reflect on yourself? And then it's funny, it's like you're writing about interpersonal relationships as a way of looking at your intrapersonal emotions about your real life interpersonal relationships. It's very complex.
Not funny, haha. More like funny, weird.
It's not funny. It's not funny, weird. I think it's interesting. But do you think that writing it helps you in any way, or do you think you're still kind of working through it?
I think it helps on like a very minuscule level, but still working through it.
Gotcha. And do you think that you would ever? It's kind of very similar question I asked Katie. Kind of genre hop as you explore these themes. Like, do you think you could ever see yourself writing a contemporary story about family relationships and relationships with other people, where that's like the main theme? I mean, obviously every story, unless it's like, Walden or something, is, has relationships with other people. And I've never even read Walden. I'm assuming there's another person there, but I don't know.
There isn't.
Okay, well then never mind.
I mean, unless you count his friends that he walks 8 miles to go have lunch with.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say to have sex with. Oh, like that's dedication.
It's my headcanon that Henry David Thoreau was asexual.
But yeah, Devesha, do you ever see yourself like having that be a heavy theme in a contemporary that you write? Interpersonal?
Yes, I have an idea for it's an idea for a screenplay, so I'm not quite sure
I love that.
how to classify that. But yes.
Okay. Well, I'll let you get your bum off the hot seat. Thank you so much for what's the word? Not placating me, humoring me. I don't know where Steve went, but this is us wrapping up. Everybody was super excited about the. Oh my God. He was like transported.
He's moved. His thing's dying, I think.
He's hanging out. Lexi was literally dead. Jess could hear people breathing, and Lexi said that was me breathing. And yeah, we all do need therapy. Hi. All right. Does anybody have any final words or thoughts about this interesting kind of phenomenon of everybody's kind of genre switching at the moment, either from contemporary to fantasy or vice versa?
Don't skip therapy.
Okay.
Don't skip therapy. Wallace, what about you? Give us some. What's your affinity and / what themes do you explore?
I am definitely a Laura Nettles type, where it's typically very grounded in reality, but with a twist. So I would say fantasy, but not extreme or high fantasy. And yeah, like I said, I pretty much inadvertently continue to explore the idea of isolated woman, of a woman by herself, usually set adrift emotionally or literally, in terms of some of my chocolate short stories. I mean, even that's the crazy thing. Even within my chocolate short stories, like count on your hands how many are about isolated women. Freaking Maison
All of them.
The Icebreaker, like the freaking Salt Bay.
Salt bees.
I don't think I've done. Oh, freaking the very first one I wrote, Lavender, A Girl in the Wild. She just
Lavender.
Yep, like that is consistently my
The one about drugs.
The one about drugs. Which one did I write that's about drugs? Oh, yeah, the moon one, the mint one. Yeah, that's
the Dune ripoff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the Dune ripoff. Yeah, exactly.
The chocolate trilogy.
The chocolate trilogy. Oh my god, this is blowing my mind. The Darkness Comes at Midnight about the little girl and the rat. Like,
And the rat, yep.
oh yeah, like there's
That other one, the fucking air balloon one that you never published.
oh, that I never published, Pilots Flying Pink Skies. Actually, I would say that's that's interesting because like it's her first time flying by herself, but she's still with her whole family. But it is, yeah,
She's flying alone.
You really could, from all of my chocolate short stories, make an argument that in some aspect it's about a girl who is isolated in some way to various levels of extremes. But that's why my answer is so boring, because literally that's the one theme I truly consistently always have. And I don't think it varies across genre. I think it's always that, just always. So, and I think that's because I, need to work through some stuff, obviously.
Don't we all?
Or I just
Really, though.
always find myself happiest when I'm alone, and I want to write stories that make me happy. And so I'm like, well, first of all, it's a girl, obviously, and secondly, she's alone.
And she's working through her trauma alone.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot to be said about aloneness versus loneliness, and I think that the kind of isolated woman I write definitely depends on where I am within that state, because there are times in my life where I'm just alone and content, and then there are times in my life I'm extremely crushingly lonely, and that's going to obviously create different kinds of stories. But I don't think, though, that that one theme that I explore is genre dependent. Literally, you could throw any genre at me and I'll be like, okay, this is how we make it about an isolated woman. So yeah. So yeah. Oh, the chat is thinking about getting together. Next time we're together, let's do a stream. Lexi, can we just hang out without streaming? Not allowed. We're content creators, must farm content. Yes, all hail our Lord and Savior content. So many that we can't even remember. Yeah, literally there have, which is crazy because I feel like I haven't written that many chocolate short stories, but the number that
Maybe
I have
just because
written
they're all the same.
What? Sorry.
Maybe you can't remember them all because they're all the same.
Yeah,
You think you haven't written that many?
There's literally no difference. Which, by the way, though, guess what I brought with me? I remembered to pack. I packed 2.
Yay.
So I didn't do Bowl of Fate. I just kind of randomly grabbed. This one was one that had already been chosen by the Bowl of Fate. And so I got to get to it sometime. And then this one I chose because it's dark chocolate with elderflower, and that sounded really good. And it was also one of the least expired ones. But Marta is gone, but she told me she was going to write one. When we went to Fortnum and Mason together, she bought the matcha one, and she was going to write that story. So Marta, if you're watching the replay, I would like to know when that is going to happen so I can put it in my chocolate short story playlist. But anyway,
yeah,
there we go. How's everybody doing?
Cut.
Good.
I've got 1 minute until lunch, so we're going. No time to answer the how's everybody doing question. See you all next Friday.
Yeet.
Accountability will be happening. Bye, everybody. Where's the outro? I don't know. This isn't it, but I'm going to play this.
Father, Son, and House of
Do, 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 do.
Now remember.
Don't forget.
Do, do, do.